we will have a very short contribution from an ecologist of the University of Milan that will discuss with us the possibility to adopt mitigation strategies on glaciers and the ecological impacts of glacier decrease. So Roberto, are you online?
Yes, Guglielmina, I'm here. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Roberto. You can
Good morning to everybody.
Okay, if you share the screen, you can add some elements to our discussion on this kind of impacts on the environment, on the mountain environment. Okay, Roberto.
Okay, can you see my screen correctly?
Yes. No, it's not a full present. Okay.
Sorry, just a second. So setting is sometimes tricky with this. Okay. Now I think you can see it correctly.
Okay, it's correct.
So, thank you very much. We saw in the last presentation that glaciers are suffering very quick melting, and in the last year, in the years, some different methods has been developed to try to at least reduce and mitigate the ice mass loss. There are different methods, but for brevity, I cannot enter in the details. Just say that at the moment, the most effective method to reduce ice mass loss is the use of the cover of a glacier by some geotextiles. As you can see here on the Rhone glacier, that is covered by these geotextiles in its lower part. However, this kind of technology is effective, is limited, as it can only reduce the ice mass loss and not stop it, and it is expensive, so it is applied only to limited areas of the glacier. Usually, this area that has a high economic value. So, for instance, it is used on glaciers that host ski slopes, or as in the case of the Rhone glacier in these pictures, in the area where there is a famous artificial ice cave that is visited by tourists each year. And this technology has also some important drawbacks. For instance, the installation and the removal of the geotextiles, which are usually some meters long and tens of meters wide, requires the extensive use of snowcap, which produce greenhouse gases, unless electric vehicles are used, but they are still quite rare. And in addition, the use of this technology implies that a large amount of plastics is put on the glacier. And this plastic is usually engineered with additives, for instance, to keep it whiter. And this plastic is exposed for long times, typically for months, to the harsh condition of the high mountains. And it is quite easy to imagine that these long strips of plastic can release fragments that can be degraded, and so release macroplastics or microplastics in the high mountain environment. So we already know that glaciers are contaminated by microplastics. A couple of years ago, in 2019, we published the first evidence for microplastic contamination on Forni Glacier, where we found the concentration of microplastic fragments and fiber in the debris comparable to the amount that is typically found in shore sediments of Europe. So an amount that was higher than what we expected in this extreme environment, given also that on Forni Glacier, the use of geotextile has never been done. However, there is no data about the amount of microplastics on glacier where geotextile are used at the moment. and also on their effects. For instance, it has been suggested that microplastics, since they are typically colored, can lower the glacial albedo and therefore can increase the glacial melting. Geotextile that is used for covering glacier are usually white, and so the effects of the fragment that they can release almost surely on albedo has not been investigated yet. There are also other drawbacks of this technology. So glaciers are usually considered as lifeless environment, but is not true. So they are ecosystems that are active biological community. And most of these community are made by bacteria and other microorganisms, but there are also small animals like rotifera, tardigrades, springtails, and some large insects, like is the case of this large plecoptera that lives on Patagonian glacier. And these habitats and their organisms are at a tremendous risk because of climate change. But also the technology that we can use to mitigate glacial melting can impact on these habitats, not only because they can pollute them, for instance, by releasing microplastics, but also because they physically alter the glacial environment. So for instance, life on glacier often concentrates on these small ponds, the cryoconitoes that have been introduced in a previous presentation, that form on the surface of glacier because the superglacial sediment warms up with the sun and melts the glacier and melts the ice. And these ponds clearly cannot form under a geotextile cover, but also this impact of this technology has never been considered. And if you think that the loss of the biodiversity of glacier is a minor loss, well, you should consider that even we do not know how much biodiversity glacier hosts, but some very preliminary results suggest that it can be larger than what we think. And in addition, it can also be a useful biodiversity. For instance, some years ago, we demonstrated with an experiment made on a glacier that bacterial communities from cryoconitoes are able to efficiently degrade an organochloride pesticide that is used on a vineyard and orchard, and that we know can reach the glacier with atmospheric transports. It can accumulate there and can then be released with melt water. And so the ability of this bacterial community to degrade that on site is very interesting, because they are also able to do this process efficiently at very low temperature. So in summary, to conclude this very short intervention, there is, in my opinion, an urgent need to assess the sustainability of glacial melt mitigation strategies. And the first step toward this goal is to identify the best available technology and the best available practice for their use. And in addition, we have also to consider in the study that we need to recognize the glacier as ecosystem in their own right, and also as endangered habitats and ecosystems that are literally vanishing in front of us. So thank you very much for your kind attention.